Guys, if you bought your tickets to Kingdom Business Summit 2020, got to get on there now. You'll make Uncle Wez really happy if you buy tickets today. Why? Because I'm all about momentum. Let's get this thing filled. You tell your friends. We're going to have an amazing 2 days around this country. So go to kingdombusiness.com.au and grab your tickets ASAP. All right, Craig, where should we start with this? The retail environment is in catastrophe in Australia. Last week we had Bardo go into administration.
Yep.
This week Harris Scarf went yesterday, and a whole bunch of others. So let's talk about that.
Well, it's interesting because obviously this time of year we're all thinking about going to the shops. What are we going to buy everyone for Christmas? But we as business owners, we're going to limit our spending, aren't we? Because
Absolutely.
we're going to spend our money on Facebook ads.
I hope so.
Well, other types of ads, maybe not Facebook ads, but maybe make your loved ones a macaroni thing out of macaroni, and that's their gift for the So Harris Scarf. So looking at the retail landscape, because it's an interesting place that actually sort of, I suppose, gives us a bit of a forecast as to what's happening in our economy.
Yep.
But also we can learn some great lessons as business owners. Harris Scarf, big retailer, 66 stores.
1,800 team, 1,800.
Ridiculous. Now, what I actually find funny, and I actually wanted to ask you about this, is they were literally bought 9 days ago by a private equity firm. Now, I know that what I find interesting about that is the previous company that sold them they own Freedom Furniture and Fantastic Furniture, and they wanted to get rid of all their, I suppose, general merchandising stores and focus on furniture, which is an interesting take. But why would someone buy something then 9 days later then go into receivership? What would have been their because they would have done their due diligence to whether they were going to buy it first of all.
Yep.
Why?
Because they didn't want it. It was always the plan. Because, and actually, it's in one of these papers. They didn't say it implicitly, but they said in here they didn't get the luxury of buying the other brands independently. So the seller was selling a job lot.
Yeah.
And they knew in their due diligence that they were buying it and they were putting it straight into administration. They did not want it in this particular case. Now, as the they would have a PR company on hand to be able to handle this. They hide behind the standard answer everybody does. Once we got to look at the books, we realized it's not viable. It's worse than we thought, and so we'd rather do that.
But there would have been with a buyer like that, you can see the books, can't you?
Yes, that they in their due diligence they would have known everything. That's why we know that's just a throwaway line come up with a bad PR agency, right? But so in that particular case, now it's the second time they've been in administration.
Yes.
So I think it was like 2001 or something. They got saved by a company and then they traded. Now, interestingly enough, I could probably say that I've never been into a store in my life. I mean, they're not big up on they're mostly Tassie, South Australia. But I went into one the other day. There's one that's not far from here. And I went into one the other day and I got it. The experience was pretty rubbish.
Yes.
Like the lady was old, and that's not a reflection, but she was cantankerous and miserable, and she hated the fact that I had a child with me that might have pulled something off a shelf. And it was slow and there was no vibe, right? So just saying, like...
Yeah, well, as even before buying it and dumping it, they were failing beforehand. It wasn't like that they were going great guns and they tanked because of this buyout. Was it because, I look at them and I'm like, they have no, I suppose, brand. They have no, I don't identify with them as anything.
Because you're not 50 and plus, that would be why. Because they've been around, they're a legacy brand that have been around for a long time. But, it's funny because everyone in the papers are slinging mud at the seller and the buyer.
Yeah.
Right? And the rhetoric is another VC company who could not care about jobs, just asset stripping, yada, yada. You can throw mud at those two parties, but the problem is the business doesn't work.
Yeah.
The business doesn't work. So,
why? What do you think it was wrong with their business model?
Well, I think that starts an interesting conversation because rather than just go to them, I think there's a general problem at play. So I did a little bit of research into the recent companies that have gone under. Okay.
Yeah.
And just to name a few, right? We got Flannery's, which is like a Whole Foods upmarket
organic
brand.
sort of.
That one surprised me.
Yeah.
Napoleon Purtis, the makeup artist, okay, which I think I've spoken on the show before about why I think it went under. It went from little middle of the mall, kind of like booths to massive shops, and the economies are not there. My guess is it just became an ego play. Roger David went under, Toys R Us went under, Esprit went under, Max Brenner went under, Ed Harry, Crabtree and Evelyn, Bardot. Bardot was only last week or whatever. So
There's some pretty significant names.
And some of them have been around a long time. Now, on the verge of going under, David Jones, Myer, Harvey Norman, right? And
if Harvey's going.
Well, yes, because they keep screaming poor. Like, why is it that all these issues and, they want to get GST added onto small purchases over, online so that they can compete. The reason why they're complaining so much is because their business model doesn't work.
Yeah.
Okay. So they may still be mildly profitable, but they're in a declining business. And I hope they can work it out. I hope they work it out. But you take businesses like David Jones and Myer, the only reason why they're still here, they've been in trouble since 2010. They've just been selling their real estate. So they might own, whatever beautiful bit of real estate in Burke Street Mall. They'll just spin that out and sell it and keep going. So they can only do that for so long, though, right? Because once you've sold all your assets, you've got nothing left. So coming back to that question of why do you think it went wrong? I think Flannery's, I don't think would be the same reason, and Max Brenner would be out of this list. But when I look at Bardot, Crabtree, Ed Harry, Esprit, Roger David, it's the same thing. It's the fact that what's unique about them.
Yeah.
And I think, as I'm thinking about the businesses going well, the ones that aren't, there has to now, like USP, unique selling proposition, is the screaming deciding factor on whether they work or not.
Yeah. Right?
So if you look at Harris Scarf and you compare them to, whoever is in their space, in fact, one of the papers says it, they're...
H&M, I suppose?
No, they're more like... Best and Less and all those kind of shops, those
Kmart and
Yep. Well, what's unique about Harris Scarf? If you want cups and glassware and bed linen, you've got a choice of 10 major players.
Yep.
So what set them apart? Because I mean, this is something I've been banging on forever for every business, right? If you cannot own a bit of the mind of your prospect with a word or a phrase or a uniqueness or something, why would they shop with you? You're fracturing your dollar so much, and if I look at those kind of whatever homeware-y type stores, what innovation have they done in a 5 to 10 year window? I'm going to go with next to nothing. Now they might say, with our point of sale system and we developed an app. Yeah, but you're a retail store. So when I walk in, what am I thinking about you that makes you stand out over everybody else in your space? We have shopping centers full of businesses that are competing with Harris Scarf. Why them? They needed to do something to stand out, right? And I don't know what it would have been, but why 7 years ago they should have targeted a younger audience. That would have been a start. Whatever. I think that's the big deciding factor for me, right? Ed Harry and Ed Hardy, okay, two different ends of the spectrum. But there's nothing unique about them. Like Roger David, I can go and buy slacks and square blue shirts from one of 32 places. Why them, right? Now, what's interesting about Roger David? They were probably one of the first on the scene in Australia to have a menswear store that was priced well.
Yeah.
But then there was 50, so they didn't work out because they didn't innovate and they didn't stay ahead of the game. So I think it's the same across all of these, right? And
so you're saying innovation?
Or
lack of innovation?
Or just a uniqueness. But innovation would be a phenomenal thing to do, right? They should have seen the writing on the wall a long time ago, and they should have innovated. And one of the ways they should have done that was come up with where they sit in the landscape and just double down on that. Okay. Harris Scarfe would have been better to cut their rents in half, stock half of the amount of products, really niche down into being amazing at those products, market that uniqueness, and they would have half the overhead, half the wages, half the rent. They could probably put more profitable products in there, and then I would actually be able to go, oh yeah, I know that they are around for this type of stuff. Yeah. Right? Why did Masters fail? Because they went up against Bunnings and IKEA, but they weren't very good at being either of those. They were actually a blend of them both, but it didn't work because we already had Bunnings and IKEA. So in our mind, we just didn't think, oh, I go to Harris Scarfe for that. That's why no one went there, which is why they ended up folding. Why do I go to Bardot? I mean, I've never been in a Bardot store, but I've walked past many. When I look inside, it's a white box with clothing on a rack. Well, if I want women's clothing on a rack, I can go to one of 52 places. Yeah. Right? So it's got to be something about the uniqueness that makes that business stand out. Right? And these companies I'm listing don't have that. The only one that does is Flannery's because they're organic, and Max Brenner. They were definitely unique. I think their issue was just too expensive. Okay. I think they just priced themselves out of the market and they could never get enough scale because they were too expensive. I remember Max Brenner, when it first opened, I actually put in a complaint, the first one I went to, on a little card, because it was $1 more to shop in there on a weekend than a weekday. What? Yes. And they were already expensive. They were really expensive. I remember it cost me $6.50 to get a coffee on a weekend and $5.50 during the week. And I wrote down just going, guys, this is madness to penalize people on the day they're more likely to have the time to come in. Right? Anyway, went under, right? Because, you know, it's just not the same. And I think Flannery's would have been the same. I think if Flannery's could have worked out in their supply chain to be 20% cheaper, they probably would have been able to work it out. So I think USP is everything in retail. Like for example, I know a young lady who runs a boutique clothing business at the top end of the Gold Coast, and she only really sells lace. Okay. Yep. Killing it. Why? Because if that's what I'm into, that's where I go. Yep. Now, if she tried to multiply that shop in every shopping center in Australia, it probably wouldn't work. Maybe it would, but because she's niched it down to this is what we do, in the mind of the masses, they're able to go, if I like that clothing, that's where I go because they specialize in it, right?
Yeah, well, in the space of a shopping mall, I mean, I don't know about you, like this is how I shop. Most men shop this way is, I know exactly what I'm going for. I know exactly what shop I'm going to, and I'm in it, and I'll go in and get it.
Yeah.
That then helps us be a little bit more targeted.
I also think at Christmas time, shopping centers should put a strip along the floor, which is the entrepreneur's lane, right? Like the masses can have the rest, but just give us a single file lane where we can move at entrepreneur speed, right? And not have, because you like walk around and then, you know, oh, Auntie Martha's da-da-da-da, and they're talking about, you know, cucumbers up a bit more. And it's so painful to go to the shops this time of year. They just need to put a blue lane down the side, and it's the entrepreneur's lane, and we can just efficiently get in and get out as fast as we can. All right. Did you have anything more to say? Because I want to flip to who's working. Like, what businesses are working?
I wanted to talk about, because going on, they've failed, but having a look at like the reject shop, right? There's something in the article in the paper today where Andrew Reach, who used to run Kmart and Target, and like he's been a part of all those. He's now been recruited to run Reject Shop, which is struggling. So I kind of like this. It's not the opposite end of the scale, but it's kind of the step before that. Receivership, people got closing down, but this company going, we need help, we're struggling, bringing in someone like that. What can they do? And I suppose that can lead on to the people that are doing well. What can they do in that sort of environment?
So potentially nothing. Like, I mean, we've just listed some businesses that have gone under, but it could be as bad as 50% of retailers in Australia are that close anyway.
Yeah.
So So that's a bigger concern, right? Because the whole landscape's hurting, right? I've had people message me saying my foot traffic's down 50% and all those kind of things. So the economy is flat, spending is flat. Now that doesn't mean spending's backwards. That means it's the same as last year, but that's not the story people are having. Reject shop. The biggest problem they're up against is how many reject shops do we need? Yeah, they're not the only one. So what somebody needs to do, if any of, because I mean, there's 5 or 6 brands of reject shops that are national, that someone needs to go on an acquisition hunt. You have to gobble them up, because otherwise you're splitting the reject dollars between too many players. Yeah. So somebody needs to come and go, whatever, reconcile the industry down to a few players, and then the dollars will be fine. But for you, when you're failing and you're up against the ropes, to go to a venture capital firm and say, I need 200 million to go on a shopping spree, they're probably not going to want to back you because it's fully risky. So, but the only way to do this would be to condense the industry and go on an acquisitions hunt.
So you don't believe this CEO will be able to bring.
Well, I've got no idea who he is, Mr. Reich. But what could you possibly do? I mean, I don't know. Like, if they've got mounting debts, which they probably do. I don't know if they do, but if they've got mounting debts, you got to come back from a long way. Well,
they've got a debt of his salary of $800,000.
Well, you should pay more for a CEO because you get peanuts. Here's another play that could play out. If they were to just tread water, 36 months, 3 years, everybody else may just fall over. And then they've effectively done the same thing without acquiring. So in those industries on the way out, you can be last man standing, right? So just thinking about the watcher right now who's got a shop in the middle of Australia who's struggling, hanging on is a pretty good strategy. Yep. Because the 3 other clothing shops that disappear in your town in the next 12 months means that your market share at the end is 3 times as big. So that's a strategic play if ever there's one.
Let's talk about the ones that are winning.
So Smiggle. Right?
Yep. Unique.
Right. So, and by the way, up 22.7% on last year, up 70% over 2 years, right? Global expansion, and so Premier Investments is Solomon Lew, who started Just Jeans and the Just Group and JJ's and Portman's and a few others. He's a big shareholder in Myer, and he's an agitator because he reckons the whole board should step down.
That'd be a fun meeting.
So Smiggle up 22.7%. Peter Alexander, the
sleepwear.
Yeah, what do you call it?
Like pajamas.
Pajamas. They're up 14.5%. Now they're part of the same group. So Peter Alexander and Smiggle are both Premier Investments. H&M is up 11%. Now, that's not including new stores. That's 11% on a store-by-store basis, okay? That's huge. Here's what's interesting for me. So I looked at Premier Investments' latest finance report to the stock exchange, and since 2013 to 2018, they've grown their online sales from 2.6% to 11%. Now, when 11% of your revenue comes online and you don't have the overhead, that's really interesting. Yeah. So Myer and David Jones are both sitting at 1% and 1.2% of sales coming online. They did a very bad job of seeing the digital move, and now they're chasing their tail and they can't get it. So when 11% of your, $400 million revenue is online with no overhead, you are making some money there. So that's an interesting play that a lot of people aren't doing well. MJ Bale, the menswear clothing, the suit retailer. Yep. They're doing incredibly well. Kiki K is absolutely killing it. And Seed, actually, the babies and mums clothing shop is doing incredibly well.
Each and every one of you said is unique.
Right.
Well, they have a real niche.
What about Apple? What about Nespresso? What about Lush? These are all companies that are going incredibly well right now. Yeah. So this is where I wanted to go, right? This is the learning for everybody. What are Kiki K, MJ Bale, Apple, Nespresso, Lush, Smiggle, Oroton, Peter Alexander, MJ Bale, Kiki K, Seed, what do they have in common? They are unique in their marketplace, and they give an experience when you shop there. So there is something about these retailers that have decided to do something different. For example, I went into Lush the other day, right? They make all the soaps, and it is a hive of activity. There are literally staff who are saying, hey, I'm about to grab this one off the shelf and fuzz it up and smell the soap and come and put your hands in it and feel it and rub it over your body. And they're happening through the store, like this hive of activity. Nespresso, get coffee. Apple, play with products. MJ Bale, they treat you like an old tailor, measure you all up, draw it all out and stuff like that, right? And so when I look at that and Smiggle, the smell of the toys and the rubber and the Play-Doh and all that sort of stuff, it just gets you there. Hey, Peter Alexander's got the bed, try it all on. So when I think about those, I'm like, not only are we able to put those businesses in a box, right? Kiki K are running workshops in every shop all day long about how to be more organized and how to and if you were to ask Kiki K what business they're in, they're not in stationery, they're into improving people's lives through efficiency and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So they're focused on, they're unique, but they're focused on giving people an experience. And that's what was the experience when you went into Roger David?
Some grumpy teenager that didn't want to serve you.
Esprit, Max Brenner, Ed Harry, Bardot. What like when you think about walking into Lush, where there's this hive of activity and they're all excited and they're high on the fumes of the soap, and you walk into Bardot, which is a box with clothes on shelves, what's the experience? That's why it went under, because the dollars don't go far enough to go to a company that people can't remember or can't associate with. Yeah. So the way you take this is you go, I've got to absolutely double down on the experience in my retail store. I've got to bring in a DJ. That wouldn't work for everybody, but I've got to do something that leaves people an indelible impression that says, I have a great experience here. Right? And then once you do that, then your customers will become sticky and you'll be unique. And yes, retail's hard, but if you actually, now this is a bit harsh, the people that are suffering are the ones doing it badly.
Yeah.
They're not innovating. They're not thinking for their customer. They're trying to do business as usual, and it's not. So one more stat just to be fun. By 2025, which is 5 minutes away,
yep,
right, in the scheme of things, 45% of the purchases of global luxury goods will be by millennials and Gen Z. Nearly 50. So nearly 50% of all purchases will be millennials and Gen Z. Now, why is that important? Because they don't want to go. In fact, they are channel agnostic. They're not romantic about going to a shopping center.
Yeah.
They're not romantic about walking through a luxury store. They're romantic about being seen with the product.
Yeah.
Not the experience of shopping. So they'll buy any way they want to, as long as they get the outcome they're looking for, right? Gone are the days where, like, very few girls go shopping with millennials. That's just not what they would rather be doing. So for them, they're just, give me the product.
So do you feel that those millennials are going to be are going to be like brand loyal to who's been investing in them now, or like how do you see that playing out?
I see them. I see the millennials in their shopping in two massive extremes and nothing in the middle.
Yeah.
I see them shopping it, buying clothes that have been upcycled. Shopping with the really basic, simple brands, right? Like the Academy brand, and those have got nothing on them. They're just they're affordable clothing, or they want Tiffany & Co. Bulgari. They want to have some bling in their life.
Supreme.
Yeah. But they're not shopping in middle retail.